The cries, which were loud and numerous at first, died away gradually one by one. I think the last of them must have been heard nearly 40 minutes after the Titanic sank. I am one of the survivors, Lawrence Beesley, and this is a real story, written in my words over 100 years ago. After undressing and climbing into the top berth, I read from about 11:15 to the time we struck. During this time I noticed particularly the increased vibration of the ship, and I assumed that we were going at a higher speed than at any other time since we sailed from Queenstown. Now I am aware that this is an important point and bears strongly on the question of responsibility for the effects of the collision, but the impression of increased vibration is fixed in my memory so strongly that it seems important to record it. Two things led me to this conclusion. First, that as I sat on the sofa undressing with bare feet on the floor, the jar of the vibration came up from the engines below very noticeably. And second, that as I sat up in the berth reading, the spring mattress supporting me was vibrating more rapidly than usual. This cradle-like motion was always noticeable as one lay in bed, but that night there was certainly a marked increase in the motion. And then, as I read in the quietness of the night, broken only by the muffled sound that came to me through the ventilators of stewards, talking and moving along the corridors, when nearly all the passengers were in their cabins, some asleep in bed, others undressing, and others only just down from the smoking room and still discussing many things, there came what seemed to me nothing more than an extra heave of the engines and a more than usually obvious dancing motion of the mattress on which I sat. Nothing more than that. No sound of a crash or of anything else. No sense of shock. No jar that felt like one heavy body meeting another. And presently the same thing repeated with about the same intensity. The thought came to me that they must have still further increased the speed. And all this time the Titanic was being cut open by the iceberg and water was pouring in her side, and yet no evidence that would indicate such a disaster had been presented to us. It fills me with astonishment now to think of it. And so, with no thought of anything serious having happened to the ship, I continued my reading. And still the murmur from the stewards and from adjoining cabins, and no other sound. No cry in the night, no alarm given, no one afraid. There was then nothing which could cause fear to the most timid person. But in a few moments I felt the engines slow and stop. The dancing motion and the vibration ceased suddenly after being part of our very existence for 4 days. And that was the first hint that anything out of the ordinary had happened. We have all heard a loud ticking clock stop suddenly in a quiet room, and then have noticed the clock and the ticking noise, of which we seemed until then quite unconscious. So in the same way, the fact was suddenly brought home to all in the ship that the engines, that part of the ship that drove us through the sea, had stopped dead. But the stopping of the engines gave us no information. We had to make our own calculations as to why we had stopped. Like a flash, it came to me. We have dropped a propeller blade. When this happens, the engines always race away until they are controlled, and this accounts for the extra heave they gave. Not a very logical conclusion when considered now, for the engines should have continued to heave all the time until we stopped, but it was at the time a sufficiently tenable hypothesis to hold. Acting on it, I jumped out of bed, slipped on a dressing gown over pajamas, put on shoes, and went out of my cabin into the hall near the saloon. Here was a steward leaning against the staircase, probably waiting until those in the smoke room above had gone to bed and he could put out the lights. I said, "Why have we stopped?"
"I don't know, sir, but I don't suppose it is anything much."
"Well, I am going on deck to see what it is," and I started towards the stairs. He smiled indulgently at me as I passed him.
"All right, sir, but it is mighty cold up there."
I am sure at that time he thought I was rather foolish to go up with so little reason, and I must confess I felt rather absurd for not remaining in the cabin. It seemed like making a needless fuss to walk about the ship in a dressing gown. But it was my first trip across the sea. I had enjoyed every minute of it and was keenly alive to note every new experience, and certainly to stop in the middle of the sea with a propeller dropped seemed sufficient reason for going on deck. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, opened the vestibule door leading to the top deck, and stepped out into an atmosphere that cut me, clad as I was, like a knife. Walking to the starboard side, I peered over and saw the sea many feet below, calm and black. Forward, the deserted deck stretching away to the first-class quarters and the captain's bridge, and behind, the steerage quarters and the stern bridge. Nothing more. No iceberg on either side or astern as far as we could see in the darkness. There were 2 or 3 men on deck, and with one, the Scotch engineer who played hymns in the saloon, I compared notes of our experiences. He had just begun to undress when the engine stopped and had come up at once so that he was fairly well clad. None of us could see anything, and all being quiet and still, the Scotchman and I went down to the next deck. Through the windows of the smoking room we saw a game of cards going on with several onlookers, and went in to inquire if they knew more than we did. They had apparently felt rather more of the heaving motion, but so far as I remember, none of them had gone out on deck to make any inquiries, even when one of them had seen through the windows an iceberg go by, towering above the decks. He had called their attention to it, and they all watched it disappear, but had then at once resumed the game. We asked them the height of the berg, and some said 100 feet, others 60 feet. We accepted his estimate and made guesses as to what had happened to the Titanic. The general impression was that we had just scraped the iceberg with a glancing blow on the starboard side, and they had stopped as a wise precaution to examine her thoroughly all over.
I expect the iceberg has scratched off some of her new paint, and the captain doesn't like to go on until she is painted up again.
We laughed at his estimate of the captain's care for the ship. Poor Captain Smith. He knew by this time only too well what had happened. One of the players, pointing to his glass of whiskey standing at his elbow and turning to an onlooker, said,
"Just run along the deck and see if any ice has come aboard. I would like some for this."
Amid the general laughter at what we thought was his imagination. Only too realistic, alas. For when he spoke, the forward deck was covered with ice that had tumbled over, and seeing that no more information was forthcoming, I left the smoking room and went down to my cabin, where I sat for some time reading again. I am filled with sorrow to think I never saw any of the occupants of that smoking room again, nearly all young men full of hope for their prospects in a new world, mostly unmarried, keen, alert, with the makings of good citizens. Presently, hearing people walking about the corridors, I looked out and saw several standing in the hall talking to a steward, most of them ladies in dressing gowns. Other people were going upstairs, and I decided to go on deck again. There were now more people looking over the side and walking about, questioning each other as to why we had stopped, but without obtaining any definite information. I stayed on deck some minutes, walking about vigorously to keep warm and occasionally looking downwards to the sea as if something there would indicate the reason for delay. The ship had now resumed her course, moving very slowly through the water with a little white line of foam on each side. I think we were all glad to see this. It seemed better than standing still. I soon decided to go down again, and as I crossed from the starboard to the port side to go down by the vestibule door, I saw an officer climb on the last lifeboat on the port side, number 16, and begin to throw off the cover. But I do not remember that anyone paid any particular attention to him. Certainly no one thought they were preparing to man the lifeboats and embark from the ship. All this time there was no apprehension of any danger in the minds of passengers, and no one is in any condition of panic or hysteria. After all, it would have been strange if they had been, without any definite evidence of danger. As I passed to the door to go down, I looked forward again and saw to my surprise an undoubted tilt downwards from the stern to the bows. Only a slight slope which I don't think anyone had noticed. At any rate, they had not remarked on it. As I went downstairs, a confirmation of this tilting forward came in something unusual about the stairs, a curious sense of something out of balance and of not being able to put one's feet down in the right place. Naturally, being tilted forward, the stairs would slope downwards at an angle and tend to throw one forward. I could not see any visible slope of the stairway. It was perceptible only by the sense of balance at this time. On D deck were 3 ladies standing in the passage near the cabin.
Oh, why have we stopped? We did stop, but we are now going on again.
I cannot feel the engines as I usually do or hear them. Listen.
We listened, and there was no throb audible. Having noticed that the vibration of the engines is most noticeable lying in a bath, I took them along the corridor to a bathroom and made them put their hands on the side of the bath. They were much reassured to feel the engines throbbing down below and to know we were making some headway. I left them, and on the way to my cabin passed some stewards standing unconcernedly against the walls of the saloon. One of them, the library steward again, was leaning over a table writing. It is no exaggeration to say that they had neither any knowledge of the accident nor any feeling of alarm that we had stopped and had not yet gone on again full speed. Their whole attitude expressed perfect confidence in the ship and officers. Turning into my gangway, I saw a man standing at the other end of it fastening his tie.
Anything fresh?
Not much. We are going ahead slowly and she is down a little at the bows, but I don't think it is anything serious.
Come in and look at this man. He won't get up.
I looked in, and in the top bunk lay a man with his back to me, closely wrapped in his bedclothes and only the back of his head visible. "Why won't he get up? Is he asleep?" I said.
No, he says.
But before he could finish the sentence, the man above grunted.
You don't catch me leaving a warm bed to go up on that cold deck at midnight. I know better than that.
We both told him laughingly why he had better get up, but he was certain he was just as safe there and all this dressing was quite unnecessary. So I left them and went again to my cabin. I put on some underclothing, sat on the sofa and read for some 10 minutes when I heard through the open door above the noise of people passing up and down and a loud shout from above.
All passengers on deck with life belts on.
I placed the 2 books I was reading in the side pockets of my Norfolk jacket, picked up my life belt, and walked upstairs, tying on the life belt. As I came out of my cabin, I remember seeing the purser's assistant with his foot on the stairs about to climb them, whisper to a steward and jerk his head significantly behind him. Not that I thought anything of it at the time, but I have no doubt he was telling him what had happened up in the bows and was giving him orders to call all passengers. Going upstairs with other passengers, no one ran a step or seemed alarmed. We met 2 ladies coming down. One seized me by the arm and said,
"Oh, I have no life belt. Will you come down to my cabin and help me to find it?"
I returned with them to F deck and we found a steward in her gangway who took them in and found their life belts. Coming upstairs again, I passed the purser's window on F deck and noticed a light inside. When halfway up to E deck, I heard the heavy metallic clang of the safe door, followed by a hasty step retreating along the corridor towards the first-class quarters. I have little doubt it was the purser who had taken all valuables from his safe and was transferring them to the charge of the first-class purser in the hope they might all be saved in one package. Reaching the top deck, we found many people assembled there. Fortunately, there was no wind to beat the cold air through our clothing. Even the breeze caused by the ship's motion had died entirely away, for the engines had stopped again, and the Titanic lay peacefully on the surface of the sea, motionless, quiet, not even rocking to the roll of the sea. Indeed, as we were to discover presently, the sea was as calm as an inland lake, save for the gentle swell which could impart no motion to a ship the size of the Titanic. But there were now more evidences of the coming catastrophe to the observer than had been apparent when on deck last. One was the roar and hiss of escaping steam from the boilers, issuing out of a large steam pipe reaching high up one of the funnels. A harsh, deafening boom that made conversation difficult and no doubt increased the apprehension of some people merely because of the volume of noise. If one imagines 20 locomotives blowing off steam in a low key, it would give some idea of the unpleasant sound that met us as we climbed out on the top deck. We stood there quietly looking on at the work of the crew as they manned the lifeboats. and no one ventured to interfere with them or offered to help them. It seems a mystery to some people that women refused to leave the ship, that some persons retired to their cabins and so on, but it is a matter of judgment after all. I was now on the starboard side of the top boat deck, the time about 12:20. We watched the crew at work on the lifeboats, numbers 9, 11, 13, 15. Just then, an officer came along from the first-class deck and shouted above the noise of escaping steam.
"All women and children get down to deck below, and all men stand back from the boats."
He had apparently been off duty when the ship struck and was lightly dressed, with a white muffler twisted hastily round his neck. The men fell back and the women retired below to get into the boats from the next deck. 2 women refused at first to leave their husbands, but partly by persuasion and partly by force they were separated from them and sent down to the next deck. I think that by this time the work on the lifeboats and the separation of men and women impressed on us slowly the presence of imminent danger, but it made no difference in the attitude of the crowd. They were just as prepared to obey orders and to do what came next as when they first came on deck. But if there were anyone who had not by now realized that the ship was in danger, all doubt on this point was to be set at rest in a dramatic manner. Suddenly, a rush of light from the forward deck, a hissing roar that made us all turn from watching the boats, and a rocket leapt upwards to where the stars blinked and twinkled above us. Up it went, higher and higher, with a sea of faces upturned to watch it, and then an explosion that seemed to split the silent night in two, and a shower of stars sank slowly down and went out one by one. And with a gasping sigh, one word escaped the lips of the crowd: rockets. Anybody knows what rockets at sea mean. And presently another, and then a third. Separate it if you can from all the terrible events that followed, and picture the calmness of the night, the sudden light on the decks crowded with people in different stages of dress and undress, the background of huge funnels and tapering masts, revealed by the soaring rocket, whose flash illumined at the same time the faces and minds of the obedient crowd, the one with mere physical light, the other with a sudden revelation of what its message was. Everyone knew without being told that we were calling for help from anyone who was near enough to see. The crew were now in the boats. The sailors standing by the pulley ropes let them slip through the cleats in jerks, and down the boats went till level with B deck. All this we could see by peering over the edge of the boat deck, which was now quite open to the sea. Almost immediately after this incident, a report went round among men on the top deck, the starboard side, that men were to be taken off on the port side. It was acted on at once by almost all the men, who crowded across to the port side and watched the preparation for lowering the boats, leaving the starboard side almost deserted. 2 or 3 men remained, however, not for any reason that we were consciously aware of. But while there was no process of conscious reason at work, I am convinced that what was my salvation was a recognition of the necessity of being quiet and waiting in patience for some opportunity of safety to present itself. Soon after the men had left the starboard side, I saw a bandsman, the cellist, come round the vestibule corner from the staircase entrance and run down the now deserted starboard deck, his cello trailing behind him, the spike dragging along the floor. This must have been about 12:40 a.m. I suppose the band must have begun to play soon after this and gone on until after 2 a.m. Many brave things were done that night, but none more brave than by those few men playing minute after minute as the ship settled quietly lower and lower in the sea. Looking forward and downward, we could see several of the boats now in the water, moving slowly one by one from the side without confusion or noise, and stealing away in the darkness. An officer, I think First Officer Murdoch, came striding along the deck. He looked over the side and shouted to the boats being lowered,
"Lower away, and when afloat row around to the gangway and wait for orders."
"Aye, sir."
And the officer passed by and went across the ship to the port side. Almost immediately after this, I heard a cry from below of,
"Any more ladies?"
and looking over the edge of the deck saw boat 13 swinging level with the rail of B deck, with the crew, some stokers, a few men passengers and the rest ladies, the latter being about half the total number. The boat was almost full and just about to be lowered. The call for ladies was repeated twice again, but apparently there were none to be found. Just then one of the crew looked up and saw me looking over.
Any ladies on your deck?
No, I replied.
Then you had better jump.
I sat on the edge of the deck with my feet over, threw the dressing gown which I had carried on my arm all of the time into the boat, dropped, and fell in the boat near the stern.
Subscribe for more real first-person historical stories and leave a comment if you have any family memoirs you would like to share.